Fun. Um, Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I was like almost like getting that no one's coming, I can leave earlier and go grab food. So that's what we were discussing. Um, so yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Viriato Villas-Boas. I'm here on behalf of Contextos, so thank you, Davile. Um, and I do a little bit of a lot of things. I have an undergrad in journalism and media from Birkbeck University of London. I have a master's degree in comparative politics from the London School of Economics and Political Science. I am the president of Wallride, a nonprofit that works human rights and social work through the lens of skateboarding. I am the communications and institutional director of something called Capital One, which we presented a few months ago, which works with underprivileged and underrepresented youth through the lens of hip hop and graffiti culture and urban culture. I am also a consultant with various other issues. I'm a writer, and also, I guess, all of this channels me into that overarching category of being an activist, because I really like to piss off Nazis and fascists. We are here today because when Davile told me that we were going to give continuation to the Visible Past project, where I was present in Coimbra, and Professor actually walked us around and gave us a new perspective on how public spaces actually interfere and interact with ideology, and how the past actually has a way of basically bringing us into the present and affecting our present self. I'm a little bit shy, so hence the book and the notes and stuff, because I like to think, but I don't deal well with interacting with human beings, so don't mind me. It's not personal. Um, so yeah, when she gave me the challenge, I was like, oh, how can I turn like this into real life clickbait? So I named this talk from the Agora to the skateboarding plaza, and what connects Europeans through space and time. I will talk very I will leave a lot of information out, because each of these topics is a conference in itself. So don't be too academically strict on me, because this is basically one big analogy, which I hope is founded in factualness. So I will go through the conceptual definition of each of these topics, once again, very superficially, in a way that I can reach some sort of conclusion, or we can all communally reach some sort of conclusion regarding what it means or what it doesn't mean to be European, and if there is such a thing, and how can we actually work towards that in a way that is productive and meaningful and constructive. So the first definition, I would say that it's important for us to understand what the Agora is, or was, or what it still means today. So in a nutshell, the Agora was something that became organically conductive to human interactions. That's the basic instinct of it. So what I've seen from the Athenian Agora, basically it started as people would live there because there would be some form of like either agriculture or other forms of medievalish way of sustaining, or basically proto-industry, which would then lead to the rising of infrastructure that was conducive to trade. And then from there, once people were fed and you start to get more people coming around those places, you give way to forms of some form of proto-government, where you organize people, and once you're not hungry, you can actually start to step forward into other ways of making society more humane per se, where we don't all need to work the fields, because there's people dedicated to agriculture, to the arts, to the culture, and the things that connect us. So in a very, very summarized manner, the Agora became a place where people used to gather to talk politics, arts, religion, anything that would, bring us a little bit forward as a human community. And this is a place which inevitably led to the foundations of democracy, of philosophy, of public debate, and civic participation. Obviously, with a lot of, with not such a pretty description on today's standards, a little bit like, I don't know if all of you are familiar with Habermas's public sphere, but it was also an exclusionary practice because only free-born citizens were able to participate. Women that were considered to be good women or upper classish were not seen with good eyes frequenting the Agora, and a lot of other things in between. So even if you were a freed slave, you didn't have access to this space. In my research, I saw somebody saying that the Agora, in its literal historical sense, was more in tune with South African apartheid rather than today's notions of democracy. But this is a little bit of this kind of like this detour kind of kills the analogy. So let's think of the Agora basically as a place that allows for different people to bring different perspectives into the fore and then start to build something that resembles of a communal identity. With that in mind, I went through this one. I go basically to how skateboarding to me became something that kind of resembles a modern Agora, or the possibility of it. And to those who are not familiar with the culture, I would say replace skateboarding with something else. Chess, card playing, everything that doesn't the important parts of skateboarding is that unlike politics, unlike religion, unlike even classical forms of sports like football, etc., that involve teams and very defined antagonic relationships with other human beings, skateboarding is that kind of thing because it's communal, but it's individual. I can choose to break the social contract of skateboarding and go do it by myself. I don't need other people. I'm still going to achieve that goal of that practice. With religions, we know people will kill for it at a certain extreme, even though they preach something. With football teams, I might not know anything about football, but my shirt is green, your shirt is red. I need to, hit you in the head with a bottle. With politics, the same thing. I know nothing about the program that party A, B, or C is pushing forward, but I'm still going to kill you because it's fashionable, to oppose that. So I think we need more naive excuses to congregate with each other in order to facilitate communication. So through the lens of skateboarding, and especially the work that I've been doing in Faro with the nonprofit that I founded, basically we encountered the Faro skate park, which is my home city, completely socially and physically completely destroyed. It was a place where you would have physical violence, police violence, drug trafficking, drug consumption, and everything in between. And sometimes you were able to skateboard if you were allowed. I started to organize a team of people that were pretty much the older generation, my generation. I'm 34 now. I started skating when I was about 10. So we encountering something that gave us so much work to achieve and to conquer, because the skate park was built in 2008. We all were skating for 8 to 10 years by then. And then seeing it completely destroyed, it bothered us at an emotional level as well as a practical one. So we started slowly kicking out the bad people. Once again, because of time, I'm going to use dichotomies like this one. No, good and bad doesn't exist, but we all understand each other better with simple terms. But basically, we started kicking out, sometimes through more diplomatic ways, sometimes with other murkier, processes. But we kicked out the junkies, we kicked out the drug dealers, we kicked out the police, mashallah, and basically through a lot of hard work and starting in a very do-it-yourself manner, reconstructing the space, we were handed a contract from Town Hall that grant us a decade of legitimacy over the space. From there, we built through ship containers that were donated. We built offices, we built music studios, we built places for kids to do their homework, etc. And then that led us as well for the skate park to start being frequented by various people that were there organically. So I'm talking about the Gypsy Romani community, I'm talking about Ukrainian refugees, I'm talking about African descendants, women, non-binary people, LGBTQI plus community. So everybody in a way, in one way or another, and even heteronormative cisgender people like me, white, middle class. So but we gathered around that place not to conspire to change the socio-political status quo of society. We gathered to skateboard, to do something very naive regardless of anything. But how that becomes politicized is once you skate with someone that makes you feel good, you get along, etc., and you congregate around that. Once that person one day comes and they're not well with the world, they're feeling down, or you see that their energy shifts, or they stop showing up. You start to like, okay, what's up with you today? Even if you know each other very superficially, and then the answers will range from, I have no food at home, I'm being kicked out, which is a big problem in Portugal with the hikes in rents and stuff. People are being pushed out of their homes. Or I went to the supermarket and this lady told me to fuck off to my own country because I speak Brazilian or I have a Brazilian accent, or I look Indian, so they told me I stink, or I'm a woman and I was still to be put to my place. So these things, they mattered even if you're not a politically minded person, because they affected you directly in the sense that it's like, oh, I was going to have so much fun today with my friend doing this naive thing that we like, and it can't because it's affecting that person's ability of conducting themselves through daily life, which then leads to deeper reconstructions of society. And the skate park functions as an agora because we were lucky as well to have people from all walks of life. So somebody who's a little bit more, formally educated as myself, with somebody who doesn't even have fourth grade, from somebody who's really good at audiovisual and photography, to other people who are really good, cooks or whatever. And everybody started to pitch in. So I was able to tell them, like, okay, you are a victim of structural racism because of this and that and that, and start to put that in terms that people understood in their own experiences, and therefore educating a little bit more formally on how to actually navigate the system and the machine. And those people actually brought me their experiences of like, okay, you're a white dude. You're not going to feel in the supermarket the same way that I, a Gypsy Romani person or an African descendant, feel. And by exchanging experiences, we as a group became extremely politicized. And just like the Agora, because of something that was not related to the democratic process or the elevation of a community, became something that it's like, we at various levels are very much prepared to have debates with politicians, to navigate bureaucracy, to access funding, to do that around that same place. Which then led to another step, which was to understand our neutral place in the sphere of activism. Whereas we were not a feminist organization, but we would do feminist work. We're not a LGBTQI plus organization, but we would do that. We're not an anti-racist, and etc. You get where I'm going with this. So we started welcoming other activists into our space because, number one, we had ownership over it, which was good. So police can't come and break whether a protest or an arts workshop or whatever. And at the same time, we're saying that it's like, okay, maybe if the feminists are not really in tune with, the anti-racists, or as it happened, for instance, with the Palestinian cause, where you would have pro-Palestinian protesters wanting to protest an LGBTQI association in the same city because of Eurovision, because, they wanted to do a screening, which is legitimate, but the other people wanted to protest the existence of Israel within that sphere, which is also legitimate. But at the same time, as institutions, we cannot be fighting each other, because at the end of the day, we will be feeding the people that want to destroy us all, regardless of our differences. And we know that in Italy, I know very superficially, but I can say for sure that fascism is on the rise in Portugal. The newer forms of fascism, okay, we can't say that it's the same suit and the same, stars and the same nomenclature that was used by Mussolini. But come on, if it smells like shit, if it looks like shit, it's shit. So that's a little bit of what's happening in Portugal right now. So we're forming these bubbles of resistance where we would have people with handicap seats coming to the skate park to discuss their work and to, make postcards for their protest, etc. And what's a person in a wheelchair doing in a skate park? Just absolutely that. They belong there even more than somebody who's an idiot and goes there to skate. So through that part, the skate park, and it is an analogy because this happens at a micro level with other skateboarding communities. It's similar to the Agora in the sense that it's purpose built for something, but it ends up functioning as something else. And as I'm saying, replace skateboarding with chess, with the photography club, with anything that is not ideologically or emotionally charged as of yet, and then start bringing that into your own backyards. So that's how skateboarding starts to become an agora per se. It also has two very important factors here because it's of low cost access. So a skateboard is relatively cheap compared, to a surfboard or to tennis or to, I think, paddle now is really fashionable. And these are all things where you have to pay for access to venues and you have to buy expensive gear. So in skateboarding, beyond the fact that it's relatively cheap, there's also a culture within the community that it's like, okay, you don't have a board, you don't have money for a board, I'll give you my old one. It's not perfect, but it's good for you to start doing your first steps. So in that sense, that access also ends up democratizing it. Another thing that is very important in the practice of skateboarding is democratization through pain. I've been skating for 20 plus years. And the nature of skateboarding implies you're going to fall repeatedly and constantly. That's the whole thing. Like, you're not skating to win, you're skating to constantly evolve. And that evolution is built on pain because you're going to keep on falling. These teeth aren't mine. I have a clavicle that is out of place. I suffer every day for the first 5 minutes as if I was 80 years old, which I am at each knee. So pain is pain regardless of the complexity of a trick. And that is something that we all learn at a very early stage. Where it's like, okay, you're all going to start skating today. You're going to get on the board and you're going to fall because you cannot even stand still. It's going to hurt you as much as if I throw myself off a set of stairs and I break my hand. So this is something where you would see that there's the culture of mocking someone, which you see a lot in football, for instance, with opposing teams or something. The players are playing, but the people in the benches are, either racial slurs or making fun if somebody misses a goal or something. In skateboarding, that happens in the first 3 days when somebody's really new to the culture. But once you actually get in there, like, okay, I'm not going to make fun of that kid because I'm doing that right now. So that democratization through pain is very important as well, in the sense that it does connect us. And nothing connects us more as human beings than pain, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, etc. And then if we're smart enough and we become empathetic enough, we know that if I break my nail or if somebody is, on a cast, then I can transpose that pain. Another thing that is very important about skateboarding when it comes to fomenting empathy is that even if I am a white male, heteronormative, cisgender, upper middle class, while my dad is still alive, after that we'll see. So even if I'm all that didn't stop me from the first time that I actually got physically assaulted in my life. I was 11, 12 years old, and it was a policeman that hit me across the face because I was just moving from point A to point B, skateboarding down the road. So as far as we're concerned, and the antagonic relationships that happen, that people do not want us in the streets, that people do not like, that they equiparate skateboarding to vandalism, all of that puts us in a position that if we're smart enough, we know that we have more in common with an African descendant who's being put aside, even if the plight is not the same, and that's not what I'm saying. Even we have more in common with those people, whether we like it or not, because our existence and the way that we express ourselves in the world, the way that we choose to express ourselves, it puts us more in common with the people who are persecuted by the structures of power, such as the police and others, than the people who are actually enjoying the benefits of a policeman. I still flinch if I see a policeman, whether in Italy, in Portugal, in Guinea-Bissau, where I was. I see a person in uniform, I'm like, and people are like, "But what are? Do you have something on you?" Or no, I just don't like them. I'm not comfortable. It's a Pavlovian thing. It's like, hey, shit, the uniform. So that's the connecting point of skateboarding through other people. So I think that's why you have, for instance, the majority, and I can say this with some certainty, because we got spontaneous funding from Electronic Arts, for instance, for that, because of our expression against the Palestinian genocide. So, and you can have the least, like, I can assure you that most people in my community had no idea about the history and pretty much like the details and the complexity of the conflict. But I can assure you 100% that they know what it feels to being put aside and to being bullied. Obviously, once again, not at the same literal level, but if what you do and your existence in this world leads you to repeatedly and institutionally being put aside, and you choose to keep on doing that, you will empathize with people who are treated like shit, because you yourself are treated like shit. So these are the little specificities of skateboarding that I think make you conductive to becoming a person that should, at least in theory, be more empathetic to the world around you. When it comes to identity, it's another part of this conversation which is really hard to pinpoint, because identity is almost like religion. It's like, it's a belief per se, but once you actually start to dig in, you start to break it apart to the point that it's everything and it's nothing, you know. Once you go, and I have these conversations recurrently around me, because I was raised a Catholic, unfortunately, so I had to divorce that for many reasons, but I still find I still find it very interesting to have the identity-culture part of that conversation. And I think that once you get to that standstill where it's like you have a conversation that ends in because God said so, then you're just being intellectually lazy and you're not doing the world a favor, and neither yourself. So with identity, it's a little bit like that. I know it's layered. I understood identity through the lens of my own life experiences, and I understand that it does come to the fore a little bit more depending on the settings that you are. So I can tell you, for instance, I studied in London, and I never thought too much about my Europeanness, but until Brexit. Brexit made me feel European, because the more they told me, like, you don't belong, the more racism started to become something that was widespread in the streets. That made me feel European. It was basically an identity in opposition of something, because, you know, the racists were not European. The racists wanted the Europeans out. So because I'm not racist, therefore I'm European. That's obviously, I'm oversimplifying it, but identity assertion through that. In Portugal is the same thing. I'm come from a region that's the Algarve, which is down south. There are a few stereotypes about that region, that we're all lazy, that we only work 3 months a year because of tourism, and we're mostly ignorant people who are brought up to serve, you know, British people. So that, instead of making me reject my Algarvian identity, I do feel an Algarvian first, a European second, and a Portuguese third. And especially now with, once again, the rise of fascist movements in Portugal, claiming and, you know, holding on to that Portuguese identity of the narrative, that makes me feel less Portuguese rather than more Portuguese. So you can be a whole bunch of things. And in the Agora, you saw that, you know, the philosopher would go there to philosophize, but he would also go there to shop. The person who was making a statue or building furniture or whatever, if he was participating in the conversation, he was wearing a political skin, whereas whereas he would go back to his shop, he would be building stuff. So you see the part of the identity there. But when it gets complex is when we start to actually try to pinpoint what is European identity. And we're going to the end of the conversation, which I'm then going to leave to you for us to actually talk more openly, because I finished doing the slides yesterday. I've been doing too many things, so I haven't been sleeping much. But the point here about European identity is you have a big duality and a big dichotomy when it comes to trying to pinpoint what is and if it does indeed exist in the European identity, because you have the inclusionary lane, which says, okay, the things that connect us are the things that make us all European. So the fact that when there was the guided tour, I understood about 40 to 60% of what the tour guide was saying intuitively. But then if you ask me to repeat it back, I won't be able to say one single word. So the Greco-Roman, pretty much heritage of language, etc. Then you have aesthetics, because you made me, this building right here could be in Portugal, minus some specificities, but it could be in Portugal. So you also have the boundaries, but then you start to hit a dead end with that, because is Russia Europe? Are Russians European? Are they only European when the Cold War ends? Are they only European when Putin dies? Same thing with Turkey. And this is what leads us into the exclusionary part of it, because even you can even argue religion. There's crosses all over Europe in buildings, yes, but are they Orthodox? Are they Christian? Are they Catholic? Are they Protestant? And then what do we do with the Muslim traditions as well? Because the Algarve, the region where I'm from, was mostly part of of pretty much the Muslim uprising before it became Portugal. So there's a lot of mosques that were converted into churches, and it's taking people way too much time to actually say so. So you get to the exclusionary part of European identity, which is, so we're all Europeans based on the things that we're not. So we're white, maybe our whiteness connects us. We're not Muslim, we're Jews sometimes. We're not Ottoman, we're not Arabs, we're not African, we're not Americans because of neoliberalism, and we still have a little bit of the welfare system, not for long. So we have these two things that clash constantly, which is the things that connect us versus the things that exclude us. And I think that the only healthy thing to go, in my personal opinion, about this is understand that there is no such thing as set on stone European identity, and that is not a bad thing. To acknowledge that the European project makes the European political and economic project makes some sense, some rational sense. I saw a description many years ago that stuck with me, which is the whole point of the European Union, even before it was called the European Union, was to get Germany and French in such a tight hug that none of them would have enough room to free their hands to punch each other. So at this point, I think that by not having a defined identity, we have a choice to make academically, emotionally, politically, to start to highlight the concepts of human rights, which are dying fast, the concepts of our shared humanity. And I think that that's with migration and the opposition to migration and the European project, these are the aspects that are dying, but that we should be clinging to them, because our Europeanness, at my view, is what depends on that. Because these are the things that highlight our shared humanity. These are the things that make me feel as much of a European as anybody in this room. But if that Europeanness comes at the cost of me saying that it's like those people who are not European are not as human, then I don't want to be a European. And I think that's the thing. It's like, and that's transversal to religion, it's transversal to politics, everything. And if I say, we're having this conversation the other day, it's like, okay, my religion tells me that because you're a homosexual, you're a sinner, and being a sinner is a bad thing, but I'm still here eating with you at the same table. That's fucking stupid. It's either you are or you don't. But that to me is a form of mental illness to a certain degree. So yeah, we should start to define our Europeanness based on the things that, at least in theory, we tried to defend up until the 90s, which was the human condition is above all, and our shared humanity is to be preserved, and the things that attack that human condition should be fought against. And all else, to be honest, it's details and political noise. So is there a European identity? I hope we can achieve one. I don't think we have one at the moment. I think we're all in a very big political identity crisis, and I think we should all skateboard more. And I think this is what brings me to the conclusion. So yeah, any questions? Do we want to turn this into a conversation? Thank you. Yeah, I think I did the 20 minutes.